Hey everyone, my name is Matt. Welcome to my shop. So in about a week, I'll be in the UK taking a guitar making class at Crimson Guitars, and I am super excited about that. A guitar build has been like on my bucket list for a while. I don't play, but the idea of instrument making is kind of appealing to me. It seems like a whole nother, well, I know it is a whole nother realm of things that I have no experience with. So as we are getting to like the planning stage of this, talking about like what kind of guitar I want to make or what kind of style I want to make, I of course asked if I could supply my own material for this build, because I think that would be a lot cooler than just buying something off the shelf. So for this build, I'm going to be using this piece of silver maple and this bit of birch right here. So this chunk of silver maple is a smaller slab off of the very first large log that I cut when I first built my bandsaw mill. So this was the smaller maple crotch. It was one of the last cuts that I made on that log to get a little bit extra yield out of what normally would just be a piece of firewood. So that is this guy right here. I also have this piece of birch, which is nice and curly. It's actually the same stuff that I use to make the door panels here on my tool cabinet. So you can see the curls in that guy right there. This tree was in my next door neighbor's yard, right next to my shed. So I cut that around the same time as I cut this one about 2 years ago. And the figure in this birch is absolutely ridiculous. So I start laying out the body blank onto the maple slab. I brought this thing out here yesterday and I took a belt sander to it to remove all of the rough sawn marks, to clean everything up, get rid of any dirt or dust or just junk on the surface, to give myself a much better idea of what's going on as far as figure and color goes on the surface. Once I got it cleaned up with the belt sander, I applied some mineral spirits to the surface to give me a really good idea of exactly what kind of figure we're going to be expecting in this slab. And this thing has a lot of curl, a lot of quilting. It also has some really interesting colors because this log was sitting around for a while before I cut it into slabs. So as I looked at both sides of the slab, I'm thinking that the outer face, this face, is going to be, I guess, the good side, or the primary side of the body. So the size of the body blank needs to be 15 3/4 by 20 inches long. So if I come in and remove this bit of checking down here and bias my way up this way, because I know that there's a lot more quilting and curling up here, which I do want to include. What's going on down here is more just kind of spalting and just kind of random discoloration, and there's less of it towards the end. So I'm not too worried about, or not too torn up about, losing a bit towards the end here and shifting my blank towards the top of the slab. So I'm thinking the bottom cut will be right here, so 20 inches will take me up to about here. Also needs to be 15 3/4 wide, so that's going to be something around there if I put a straight edge right through here. One thing I really want to include is this bark inclusion. There is a ton of figure around this inclusion, and I think that is a really interesting element that I can stabilize with some epoxy and have all that figure and the exact look of that bark in there exactly as it looks, or pretty close to how it looks right now, with this void kind of full of bark. Now as far as thickness goes, I'm at about 2 1/4 right now, so I will surface this and flatten it and get it down to size. So I will lose some material on this side, which will essentially widen out this area up here, bringing me closer to the live edge. I'm actually not too worried about having a little bit of live edge in there if I can incorporate it into the guitar with a little bit of the edge missing, because the live edge, that could be kind of cool. But it's also important to keep in mind that we're just making a square blank, and that blank's gonna get further refined into the shape of a guitar, whatever that shape ends up being. So there's a lot of room for future removal. This blank is also oversized, so I'll have plenty of material here to work with when I get this thing over there to the UK. So I'm just going to grab a Sharpie and a straight edge and just start drawing out the rough shape of the blank. That'll allow me to just double check and make sure I have everything the way I want it, and I can move forward with actually cutting this thing. Because once you start cutting this thing, there really isn't any going back. The Sharpie can be removed, but it's kind of hard to put the stuff back together once it's already been cut apart. So with those borders drawn in there, I think it makes it really easy to see exactly where this blank is going to come out of the slab and all the things we're going to be able to incorporate into that blank. I do have this fall off area over here, but again, this will get wider as we remove material to get this thing down to final thickness. And you know, if the end of the guitar is rounded or curved, this is going to cut off anyway later on, so I'm really not worried about this at all. Either gets incorporated this way or it gets removed as part of the waste when the guitar gets actually shaped. So I'm pretty confident with my layout here, and I think I'm ready to start cutting into this thing. Luckily, if I screw this up, I do have the rest of this log if I need to make another blank, but I think we should be okay. So I'm going to go at this with the track saw, get 2 of the edges cut square, and then I'll use the table saw to make the other 2 parallel. Almost made it. It's a bit over 2 inches. I got about 1/8 of an inch there at the bottom, which I'll just slice through with the jigsaw real quick. So next I want to start on stabilizing this bit of bark in here and thinking about a containment strategy and a strategy overall. I think it's going to be easiest if I use this face here as the bottom, put my tape on this side, wrap it around the end, and then pour from the opposite side. That's going to allow the epoxy to flow down to the tape, get caught up there, and get sealed up that way. The side I'm using as the top has this kind of goofy live edge area, which is probably going to be really hard to seal up against, so having that nice flat side on the bottom is going to work out really well to get this thing sealed up so I don't have any spilling. So hopefully this works out. That's the vision I have in my mind, but it might be kind of interesting with this blank because it is so thick at this point. It's not super predictable what the epoxy is going to do, so I'm going to go pretty slowly with it and just kind of keep flipping it over or looking underneath it to see how much of the clear epoxy is making it down to the tape. And I can keep at this for a few hours, just checking on it every couple of hours just to see where things are at, and I can always add more as I go. So while the epoxy is doing its thing, we can get the neck stock ready to go. And for this, they're looking for a piece that's 4 inches wide, 27 inches long, and for a flat neck, which is what I'll be doing, it needs to be a 3/4 inch thickness. If you want to do an angled neck, they're looking for 1 3/4 inch, which I do have, but I think I'm going to stick with the flat neck using the thinner stock. From the pictures I've seen, it seems like that's something that looks cool, but what do I know? I know nothing about guitars. So they also specify that this piece be quarter sawn. So if you take a look at the end grain here, you can see the growth rings are running pretty close to vertical in this section here, which is a section I can pull my neck stock from. This is a board from the center of the tree or towards the center of the tree. There is the pith, which is the center of the tree. So everything from the left and right side of the pith on a flat sawn board is going to be quarter sawn. So I have some pretty good figure in the sapwood out here on both sides of the heartwood. The left side here is a little bit narrower. It's only 3 inches wide. The stuff over here is a bit wider. It's closer to 4. I'll be pulling some of the heartwood into my neck blank, which it should look pretty cool as you have some of this changing color along with the lighter color of the sapwood. Now one thing you can notice with this board is this tree has some ring shake, so you can see how the growth rings are actually separating here. It's cracked all the way down its length. So when I saw this board, I saw this in the log, and I wasn't super worried about it because I saw how much figure is out in the sapwood, and that's what I really cared about. So I want to preserve as much of this length of this piece for a future project for some frame stock or other things where I can use some narrow, highly figured stock. So I'll lay out the neck blank and then cut it out of the whole board. I'm not going to cut the whole board all the way across. I want to leave as much of the board intact as it is. I just want to pull out my blank and leave it like a negative image of something that was once there. I don't want to cut this thing down any more than it already is. So this should be pretty easy to do with the track saw. I'll first make a straight line to edge the lumber, get rid of that live edge, and then I'll come over my 4 inches and make another cut to make the actual strip, and then I can separate that strip area from the rest of the board with a jigsaw. So there is the neck blank, and it doesn't look like much right now, so I'm just going to give it a few passes over the jointer and through the planer just to clean it up a little bit, or I guess I should say the surface planer and the thicknesser, so I get my proper British terms all figured out before I get over there. So there is the stock for the neck all ready to go, and there is a ton of figure in here, and it's pretty blown out on the camera, so I put some shellac on this side, which should be a little better for the camera to see. Hopefully you can see some of the figure in there. That's looking quite nice. So the epoxy on here, it did go through to the tape a little bit, so I'm going to pull the tape off and see how this bark looks. So it looks like the epoxy made it down all the way around here and in the middle, and if I look down in this little void here, I can actually see the epoxy about ½ inch down from the surface. So it looks like it's made it pretty well through here, and I think what I can do at this point is just start filling from this side, and that should have the epoxy meet kind of in the middle there. I also have a few cracks out here, which I can fill while I'm working on this face. So the epoxy has set up overnight, and it's looking pretty good. It seems like it penetrated the bark really nicely, and what's cool about this is that the epoxy around that area kind of gives you a preview of what some of that figure in there is going to look like, and it looks like it's going to look pretty stinking awesome. So the last thing for this is going to be to just flatten it, so we can do that on the jointer and planer. Before I do that, I'll just go over one side with the sander just to remove any lumps of epoxy, which might throw off the registration on the machines, and then I can give it a pass over the jointer with the blank hanging off the edge because it is wider than my jointer. That'll create a wide rabbit, which I then can reference off of a platform in my planer to get the opposite side flat, and I can flip it around, remove that platform, and then plane off that extra rabbited area on the original face. So after planing, it's much more apparent that there's a lot of figure in here versus just sanding it quickly. So let's just take a quick look, see what we can be expecting here. Oh yeah, it's quite figured. So this is going to be one heck of a nice looking guitar in my biased opinion. Let's take a look at this side real quick. Yeah, looks like even more. I don't know how much the camera is going to see of this just quick here, but yeah, it's there's some quilt pockets right here. This is all curl all through here, and there is some extremely crazy stuff happening around this bark inclusion. So this should work out pretty nicely. So I think this combination of my crazy silver maple and some nice curly birch should make for, this is the guitar, right? Here we go. This should make for a pretty nice looking guitar. Of course, once it's actually shaped a little bit. So I am very, very much looking forward to this experience. I haven't done any instrument making before. It's been sort of a scary thing in woodworking that I have no idea about, and I don't play guitar either, so this should be interesting as well. But it should be really fun to be able to see the construction, or like this side of woodworking, which is, from what I'm told, pretty different than like furniture making. So that's a really fun thing. I love being able to explore new things within the same world of woodworking. So April Wilkerson will be with me as well, taking this class for 6 days. You can follow us on Instagram. You can follow Crimson Guitars on Instagram, and you can follow Triton Tools on Instagram. They're making this whole thing possible. So a big thank you to Triton Tools for getting this trip all set up and giving me this cool experience. They will have a video over on their YouTube channel afterwards showing the build process of myself and April building our guitars. And if you're heading to Makers Central in Birmingham, we will be there. We'll have the guitars at the Triton booth, so you can check out the guitars in person and meet us there as well. So, have I said I'm excited about this? I probably haven't said that yet. But that's going to do it for this one. I'm going to get packed and ready to go. So thank you as always for watching. I greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments about, I don't know, this guitar blank or anything here in my shop, please feel free to leave me a comment. As always, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. And until next time, happy woodworking.